Getting hurt is inevitable, but staying hurt is optional. When it comes to leadership and relationships, the thing that holds most people back is unresolved pain in the heart. It's typically not all of those external circumstances that keeps us relating to ourselves or other people in painful ways. It's those old wounds that are flying under the radar of our life. And you can't move forward and win in life until you're first willing to go backwards and heal from those old wounds. When I first walked down the aisle and said I do to my beautiful wife, not only was I surprised that she was willing to say I do back to me, but I had unknowingly carried baggage from my first marriage into my new one. Old wounds of rejection, unbeknownst to me, were still very much alive on my heart. And it did not take long for my new wife to run into my old pain. And I didn't realize it, but that wound over time had begun to produce what felt like walls around my heart. Fear and insecurity. Pride started to set up camp in my life. She would try to get close to me, and I would just push her away. And then I would feel frustrated because I wanted my wife to love me and to know me, which is the basic of most human need. But when she got too close, I would just shut down. I would avoid talking about the old wounds because who wants to deal with the conflict of messing around with all of that old pain? But I quickly discovered that if you don't deal with your pain eventually deals with you. It didn't take long before I began to witness that the old pain in my heart started to inflict new wounds on my wife's heart. Because as the old saying goes, hurt people hurt people. As our arguments started to grow closer and closer together, I noticed that our hearts started to grow further and further apart. Because no matter how hard she tried to love me through my pain, I just wouldn't let her in. And it wasn't fair. She was paying for something that wasn't her fault. She had nothing to do with my old pain. But that highlights the dangers of not dealing with our old wounds. Because we end up pushing people away from us that we should be pulling closer to us. And the people that are in our lives right now end up paying for wounds inflicted by people that aren't in our lives at all anymore. I remember one day after an argument, my wife looked at me and she said, "Travis, I love you, but I can't keep living this way. I just can't keep doing this." I remember sitting there in our living room in the middle of this really honest moment. And for the first time in our young marriage, I made a really important decision. I decided to lean into that old pain and the potential conflict that came with it. And when you're dealing with old wounds on your heart, it can feel like the scariest thing in the world to do. But for the first time, I was vulnerable. And this is when my healing journey started. And this is when I discovered something. I realized that as I started to heal, we started to heal. 23 years later, we have six amazing children. And we are more happy and we're more in love than we have ever been in our lives. Because getting hurt, that's inevitable. But staying hurt is completely optional. For the last 20 years, I've had the privilege of working with some really gifted leaders. And in that course of time, I made a pretty important discovery. I found out that my story wasn't that unique. I was surrounded by talented people, full of purpose and full of potential. But old wounds on their hearts were holding them back. And not just from love, but from life. I spoke with a really successful businessman a couple of years ago about the dangers of unresolved pain in our heart. And as I talked, I saw the light sort of go on in his eyes, and he proceeded to tell me a little bit of his own story. He told me that 2 years into his very first job, he was unexpectedly fired. He said after that, he started this sort of cycle where he would move his family to a new city to take a new position with a new company about every 2 years. He would take the position, work, and then just before that 2-year anniversary, he would quit and he would start again and then again. He said, until one day I realized that the reason I was stuck in this really frustrating cycle was because I was rejecting them before they had a chance to reject me. Old wounds from that first experience were still calling the shots in his life. So here's how this typically works. We get hurt. And instead of healing from that pain, we bury it, just kind of hoping that time will heal all things. But when it comes to pain in your heart, time alone doesn't heal it, it actually incubates it. Eventually, that unhealed wound begins to produce what feels like a wall of fear around your heart. It's the fear of getting hurt again. It's the fear of failing. It's the fear that somebody might actually get really close to you and discover just how wounded you actually are. Eventually, that wall of fear produces yet another wall, but this time it's called insecurity. And this is where our journey gets really dicey, because this is the point in our life we start to ask ourselves that dreaded question: am I enough? Or can I ever be enough? This is also the point in our journey where we're tempted to start to pretend to be someone we're not, only because we want to be loved, but we also want to be safe. So we usually start wearing a mask, so to speak, and we pick our mask based upon which one we think will get us the most love. Now, this is where it gets kind of tricky, because at first, it seems to work. You start getting the love you wanted, but over time, something strange starts to happen. You start resenting the people you're wearing the mask for, because you're not sure. Are they loving me, or do they just love my mask? You can't feel fully loved until you know that you're fully known. And as long as you're wearing a mask, neither of those things can happen, so you're stuck. Last but not least, that wall of insecurity produces one more wall around your heart, but this time it's called pride. Now, I'm not talking about the I'm proud of my kids type of pride, or I take pride in my appearance. I'm talking about this brand of pride that can make us unteachable, a little arrogant. The kind of pride that'll keep us from admitting that we were ever even wounded in the first place. I heard it once said of pride that pride is the only disease known to man where everyone knows it's there except for the one who has it. So in this elaborate effort to self-protect, we've constructed all of these walls around our pain, and the pain is in our heart. And that's a major problem, because the most basic of human needs is to give and receive love. It's to be known and to be loved. And that's virtually impossible as long as all of these walls are intact around your heart. So now you're just left living this life that's constantly marked by chronically feeling conflicted, right? Because on one hand, you want intimacy, but on the other hand, you don't want to get hurt. You pull people in to feel loved, but if they get too close where they might spot that mask you're wearing, you push them away. And this is where leaning into that old pain and the potential conflict that comes with it comes into play. Because the irony of the conflict produced by old pain is that it can actually become the catalyst you need to heal from it. I know, it feels totally counterintuitive. But if you lean into that old pain rather than away from it, you can break down those walls so that you're able to give and receive love again. So how do we heal? Number one, face your pain. I kept waiting for someone to come along and take responsibility for my healing journey. But you know what? That person wasn't coming. The only one that could take responsibility for my heart healing was me. And I think sometimes the temptation when you've been hurt is to think, if I just had a fresh start, I'd be okay. You know, if I did take a new job, if I moved to a new city, if I started a new relationship, then I think I'd be fine. The only problem with that is you take your wounds with you wherever you go. And we end up going through that cycle of unresolved pain, but this time in a new place or with a new person. This tendency to sort of suppress or stuff down those difficult emotions is something called repression. And over time, it's been proven to take a negative toll on your health, mentally and physically. As a matter of fact, Dr. Charles Solomon wrote that as we age, our ability to repress these difficult emotions begins to sort of wane. So whether we want them to or not, they start spilling over into our lives. Basically, the dam starts to break, but you don't have enough fingers or toes to stop it from coming through, so the people in your life start getting hurt. So we have a choice to make. We can either deal with our pain and heal to move forward, or wait until that inevitable day that our pain deals with us and the people in our lives start getting hurt. I'll ask you a question. What is the pain in your life that if you leaned into it, you could heal from it? Number two, forgive the person that hurt you. Unforgiveness keeps those old wounds open. It makes it impossible to heal. Because when somebody does something to hurt you and you decide that you're not going to forgive them, you're essentially adopting the belief that they owe you. And the problem with going through life believing that somebody owes you is that you start to live your life with an emotional deficit on your heart. It's a deficit that the people closest to you end up having to pay for. Forgiveness is such a healing force that Dr. Stephen Stanford, the chief of surgery at the Cancer Treatment Centers for America, was quoted as saying, "Unforgiveness is known to get and keep people sick." So much so that they started to introduce forgiveness therapy in their treatment of cancer patients. And forgiving the person that hurt you doesn't necessarily release them from their responsibility of what they did to you, but it does release you from what they did to you so you can move forward. Because getting hurt, that's inevitable, but staying hurt is completely optional. Now, forgiving the person that hurts you might mean making a phone call. Maybe not. Maybe it just means you're deciding to erase the deficit from your heart and release that relationship. Because you can't go forward and win in leadership and relationships until you're first willing to go backwards and heal from those old wounds. And number three, find a counselor. As my wife and I started to engage with a counselor, something amazing started to happen. We started to meet a version of each other we didn't know existed. It was this healed and whole version of ourselves. We were able to give love and receive it. We were able to cry together. We definitely laughed more together. We were able to be honest with each other without worrying about what would happen after that moment. It was amazing. It felt like we were falling in love again. And you know what? It turns out that that version of ourselves was always there, but we were buried beneath all of those layers of unresolved pain. We needed somebody with some experience and expertise to help us dig us up. 7 different studies were conducted over a period of 15 years, starting in 1995, to measure the effectiveness of therapy. Clients repeatedly reported that not only did their treatment endure over time, but that they continued to heal long after their therapy was over. Because counseling works. Counseling isn't just a place of healing. It sets you on a path of healing that continues long after you're finished. The greatest gift you can give yourself and the people that you love is a healed and whole version of you. It's that version of you that's able to give and receive love without fear or insecurity or pride calling the shots. Maybe it's that version of you that existed before you got hurt. Because getting hurt, well, that's inevitable. But staying hurt is optional. Thank you.